just to confession straight away. First one, when Luke put this in the WhatsApp group, I choose the last day, the last one, because I thought that I will get the maximum time to prepare and see everybody else, how they are doing this whole thing. And when I realized it was self-control, and I was like, I know what I will do. And then it was like, oh, but then I will get the maximum time to practice self-control before preaching it. And by the time you realize that was a bad strategy, right? Because the more time you get to do this, to practice self-control, the more you lose. Uh, so, so if you see the slide, so I have titled it "Not Doing the Right Things for the Wrong Reason." And of course, we can interpret self-control in kind of various different ways. One is the most obvious one is okay, let's be self-disciplined. You do a diet or let's say binge watching or anything like that, or being faithful in your Bible reading. I know all those things. But the passage which Luke gave me had a slightly different angle. So I'm not trying to do the usual, self-control per se. So hence I put the title as, not doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Of course, as Megan told, we have been looking at the fruit of spirit, in the past few weeks. Self-control is the last one. One thing, which I understood from all this reading was that if you really want to see, like, judge a person of his level of maturity in Christianity, don't look how much they pray, how much good they preach, or how much good they can sing or play. Look at the fruit of the, look at the fruits, based the 7-1 on your slides. And that's the best way to judge somebody is really matured in it or not. Because if the person is inwardly good, the right, like as Jesus told, if a tree is good, the fruit will be good. If a tree is bad, the fruit will be bad. So if you're going to see anger and lack of self-control and hatred and all, but that person comes to church every day and prays and prays and does all sort of maybe serving and all, it won't add up, at least in God's eyes. So that's a good way to kind of see how people are in or at least trying to figure out how how really people are in terms of maturity in their Christ. So that's the learning which I got from reading about all the 7 fruit of spirit. Now let's go back to the passage which I got, which is 1 Samuel 26. That's chapter 26. Let me read this for you. The Zaphites, okay, just wait for you to open it, and please keep it there because we are going to come back to some of those passages there. The Zaphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is it not David hiding on the hill of Zahiah, which faces Jeshimon?" So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph and with his 3,000 select Israelite troops to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hakilah facing Jeshimon, but David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went on to the place where Saul had camped. He saw Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had laid down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down into the camp with me to Saul?" "I will go with you," said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul. lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head, and Abner and the soldiers were lying down around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him into the ground with one thrust of spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay hands on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless, as surely as the Lord lives?" He said, "The Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come, and when he will die, or he will go into the battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and the water jug that are near his head, and let's go." So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill some distance away, and was a wide space between them. He called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, "Aren't you going to answer me, Abner?" Abner replied, "Who are you?" calls to the king. David said, "You are a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why wouldn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What have you done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and the water jug that were near his head?" Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" That's very sarcastic line to say there. David replied, "Yes, it is, my lord the king." And he added, "Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong I am guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's word. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance, and have said, 'Go, serve other gods.' Now do not let my blood fall into the ground from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for flea as one hunts a partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted as a fool and have been terribly wrong. Here is the king's spear." David answered, "Let one of you young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble." Then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. But that's a pretty, sorry. So I hope we all know the background here. If not, I will try to just do a recap. I just draw a kind of a timeline of what is happening between David and Saul. Now, when they started up, these were good guys, friends with each other. And in the starting, David did really help Saul, especially in fighting Goliath. Right, and then kind of slowly he became fan of, Saul became fan of David. So does the entire Israelites. And when you come to 1 Samuel chapter 18, that's where the things turns for the bad. Now the people of Israel is praising David more than Saul, and they sang the song of Saul killed 1,000, but David killed 10,000. and that really started, having a huge jealousy issue about, Saul, about David, and it went to an extent where he wanted to kill him, and that's where it all started. Now, for David, it was all a bit confusing, mostly because he had become his son-in-law, and at the same time, he wanted to kill him, and it was Nathaniel who kind of told him about Saul's good intentions, sorry, bad intentions. And then Saul had to sorry then David had to flee, and then the whole thing started. And that's where I guess David's most difficult time have been, where he was fleeing for his life in wilderness. And as a kid, I was a bit surprised, because I know this guy killed the giant guy with 5 slings, and I couldn't understand, at least at that time, like why he was running, all the time, because he would come back and kill Saul anytime. And I guess in my mind it was like, anyways, killing were pretty common in those days, so you could easily come and kill Saul. Anyways, he is more powerful than So and I quite couldn't understand why, and I guess I kind of figured it now, finally, after a lot of so much of years. But and that was, I guess, most troublesome time for David, and that's where he kind of wrote a lot of psalms, where he poured out his hurt, his hurt, and we have a couple of psalms, 17, 18, 52, 57. Those were the psalms which he wrote when he was fleeing, and where he really poured out his heart, in the sense that how he was victimized for no fault of his, although he had utmost respect for Saul, but then Saul was after his life, so clearly he was a victim here. And in all those pain and all, he was fleeing from Saul. And if you come to Samuel 24, that's where the first time Saul finds him, hiding in the cave. And Saul knew that David was there, and David got a chance to kill him. And for everybody's surprise, he didn't kill him. And he used the same word, which is very kind of often coming in the passage, where David says he's Lord's anointed. Now, clearly, when we read it, we can understand that Saul had kind of lost that position, at least theologically, because the way he has started behaving. But David was very clear in his mind that Saul was Lord's anointed person, and that means something for him. So that's where we kind of come into chapter 26, where this same thing is happening. And let's kind of now, if you want to open the Bible again and look at verses 1 to 4. So verses 1 to 4 is where Saul is continuing his relentless pursuit of David to kill him, somehow obliterate him once and for all. And that's what happens in the first, so and he takes out 3,000 soldiers with him to kill him. So you can understand the desperation of Saul, and the anger of Saul, and the hatredness of Saul against David. So he's carrying that much. So his jealousy has now kind of turned into hatred, and in outright hatred, and anger towards David. And that's what we see, in the initial 4, passage. But from, chapter 5 to 12, David again shows a very different character in the sense that what he's made of. And kind of that's where kind of my focus was. That, let me read once again, probably verses 5 to 12. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had laid down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army camped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Will you go down into the camp with me to Saul? I will go with you." So David, Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. And here's a killer verse. Abishai said to David, "Today God has given your enemy into your hands." Now, if it was me, I would be very sure to claim, God's promises, because it was not the first time, it was the second time. And in all possible way, you would be expecting. I don't know if at this point whether God was surprised or not, but any reader would be surprised that David chose and as kind of you can see in verses 13 to 16, what he does is he said, "I'm not going to kill him." And that's the reason I kind of put that word in terms of not doing the right things for the wrong reason. At this point, he's in his all right to kill Saul. He has done nothing wrong. He has been faithful to God. He has been faithful to Israel. He had been faithful to Saul. He spared Saul's life once. So it all more makes sense to kill him at this point. And I guess in terms of and I will come to an application part of this, but his theology at core was very solid for him, regardless of what Saul was doing. For him, Saul was God's anointed, and that was one truth which he didn't want to trade for anything else. And that, when we're talking about self-control, or when we're talking about doing, not doing, right things for wrong reason, we must have a definitive truth to anchor upon and say, this is why I'm not doing this. Else, if we are, guided by our circumstances, then it becomes very easy to fall into the temptation and say, yeah, this looks God's, God's path. Now, if I take a slight detour in the morning, and it came to mind in the morning because Roger Caswell mentioned about his trip to Lebanon and Beirut. I happen to know a pastor in Beirut. I only know him from YouTube and everything, not like personally. He was there in Billy Graham's funeral. If you have seen the video, or if you're gonna take, he's a timid man. He was there because it was his preaching which actually converted Franklin Graham into Christ. And as he told, Beirut Lebanon has changed over the time, both in terms of the political uncertainty or the economic uncertainty. So while night curfew, he was driving through and he found one suitcase lying down on the road. Now, if it's a curfew where you have a shoot at sight order, you really don't go out of the car and take a suitcase. But then and there's a couple of interviews of him, in the YouTube, and you can probably, if you watch that, you can judge how much fearless he is, in his character. So he went out, he stopped the car, he went out and he took the suitcase and come back home. He opened the suitcase, it was filled with cash to the end. And there was one business card in it. Now, in all probability for everybody, that is God's, providence, that's the God's will. And to even his wife's surprise, he took that business card and called that person, who had, and he rang up and he said, "Did you miss the suitcase?" And yeah, you have it? He's like, "Yes." So he told, "Okay, anyways, you take it because I was trying to flee the country. The suitcase was, I had tied that suitcase at the top of my car. It fall off. I am not, my plan to go out of the country has anyways failed. I don't need that money. Take it." Second sign, this is God's will. But Sammy Dagger is like a bit smarter than, our average Christians. No, 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 no. I only take this amount of money in a Sunday in a Sunday worship as an offering. So if you want to give this money to me, so you better come to a Sunday worship and then give this money to me. So he was a rich businessman, not a Christian. He came with his family. He still can't believe that this guy has not taken my money. He still can't. And after the service, was over, he came and like, "How can you say no to this money?" And then he told him that, "Brother, I have, wealth in heaven, which nobody can steal, which will not fall off, when I'm driving my car. So this money is not, I am not really interested. I was interested in you and not the money." And, and that day he got this, opportunity to kind of, lead them to, Christ. Just as an example, in a sense that if our theology is right, then only we could say no to things which feel so right, at the outset of it, but the end result of them is kind of wrong. I'm sorry, kind of detoured a bit, but I will come back. I guess I kind of covered some of it again. But the second point was the one which I kind of focused. Anyways, the slide looks fancy. It's from an AI tool. I didn't spend much time on it anyways. But the first point, again, all the fruit of the Spirit are something which we don't get as a gift. These are these are the characteristics you want to cultivate intentionally in your spiritual life. And they're not going to come easy. Like today afternoon after church, we were talking and me and Alice got talking, and she kind of told an interesting line that self-control is that one fruit which is very necessary to anchor all of the others. Because if you lose self-control, you really can't hang on to the others, because ultimately you will lose all of them. Because to kind of persevere, to love, to endure, to have happiness, you need to have self-control. Because when the tough time comes, it's kind of the self-control and the self-disciplines are the one which kind of really helps you to anchor everything else. So please, so hence, maybe self-control is the last, probably, because that kind of forms the basis of it. Other key was, cultivating patience and trust. One other thing which David does, and at this point, of course, David had this mind that he don't want to be the person who is going to kill Lord's anointed, but he's not saying that he don't want him to be killed. Because if you come down to verse 23, which says, "The Lord rewards every one of their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord gave you into my hands today, but I would not lay hand on a Lord's anointed. Surely as I valued your life today, so the Lord value my life and deliver me from all the trouble." So he was ready to wait for God's providence and God's timing. So that means not doing right things for wrong reasons would also mean that you have to wait for God's timing and God's providence. to come to you correctly. But for that, our theology has to be right. Else you can't turn out, we can't turn down a full bag of money, especially when it's filled. So, kind of, try to summarize it. If you really want to be a good, mature, fruitful Christians, then we need to cultivate all the, seven, fruits. It's all part of the fruit and not fruits. I had heard a sermon about why it is not a fruit, why it's not fruits and why it is just a fruit. Regardless, there are some parts of it. We need to intentionally cultivate it in our personal and spiritual life. It doesn't come, as somebody had pointed out, it's not a gift, it's a fruit. Gifts are the one which you freely get from God. This is not those ones. So we have to ultimately work for it. But having said that, this is the same David whom we know that when he became king, he lost it, right? In his, the episode with Bathsheba. So we can practice good self-control the one time, but that doesn't mean that's success every time. That's kind of, shattered me. But Bible, thankfully, is good, kind of, is kind of plenty of such examples which shows that although this is something which we need to cultivate, we really can't do without God's and the Holy Spirit's help. It's not going to happen, and we might fall sometimes. Even after all this, David is described as a man who is after God's own heart, right? And that's a big compliment to have about somebody. So we can fall, but that shouldn't stop us from actively and intentionally trying to harness and kind of cultivate all the fruit of the Spirit, and not just self-control. But these are the seven, let's say targets or something which we can actively put in our goal sheet as such, and try to work through it and kind of try to achieve it. But we won't be able to do it without our prayer, our daily disciplined life, walk with God, and without the help of Holy Spirit. So I'm going to stop there. Have 3 discussion questions on the screen, so we could kind of gather around our own tables and discuss it for I don't know how many minutes we're allowed. 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes, and then Megan will kind of come and close it. Thank you.
Could you read the questions out?
Oh, sure. So the first question is, put yourself in the position of David. How might you feel towards someone who is trying to harm you in all possible way? Put yourself in the position of David. How might you feel towards someone who is trying to harm you in all possible way? The second is, I guess you have to still go back to the your Bible to verse 12. Verse 12 says, so David took the spear and water jet near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them to a deep sleep. So the question is, if we acknowledge God's presence in our own life, or let's say God's power or God's providence in our whole life, how then it will help us to exercise self-control? That's second question. Is it small? I didn't realize it when I was doing it on my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah. And the third question is, in what ways can your commitment be, a commitment to observe self-control will affect others who kind of observes us or kind of sees us?